There was once a time when knowledge fit inside a single wooden room, a room without electricity, without luxury, without anything but hope. Children of all ages gathered there, carrying worn shoes, faded clothes, and dreams larger than the world itself. They called it the Worn Room Schoolhouse. And in that fragile space, learning was more than memorizing words. It was an act of faith in the future. Imagine the sound of footsteps on dirt roads, echoing in the early morning. Small hands clutching books that had already lived through many seasons. Eyes wide with curiosity, hearts beating with anticipation. The school stood quietly, waiting, its wooden walls weathered by rain and sun, its windows simple, its benches hard, its air filled with the scent of chalk and firewood. It was not grand, it was not modern, but it was sacred, because inside that room, the impossible became possible. The bell was nothing more than a piece of iron, yet, when it rang, its voice carried across fields and valleys. It called children from farms, from villages, from places where life was hard. Some walked miles through mud and cold, others crossed streams or climbed hills, but all of them came, because the promise of learning was stronger than the weight of distance. Each step was a declaration. I believe in tomorrow. The teacher was often a young woman, her presence both fragile and unshakable. She stood at the front of the room, chalk in hand, her voice steady, her eyes filled with determination. She was more than a teacher, she was a guide, a counselor, a symbol of hope. Every word she spoke was a seed planted in the soil of young minds. Every lesson was a doorway to freedom. She taught without technology, without fancy books, without modern tools. Her strength was her conviction, her gift was her faith. Inside that room, the world unfolded in fragments. Older children practiced reading aloud. Younger ones stumbled through numbers, and the smallest drew suns and cows on slates with stubby pencils. It was chaotic, it was imperfect, but it was alive. And when the bell rang for recess, differences disappeared. They ran together across the grass, laughed together, shared bread, shared dreams. The greatest lesson was not written on the board. No one learns alone. In winter, the stove glowed faintly, its warmth fragile against the biting cold. Children huddled close, their breath visible in the air, their fingers stiff, their cheeks red. The teacher told stories, tales of courage, of kings, of slaves who dreamed of freedom. Her words painted worlds beyond the wooden walls, and without realizing it, she was teaching more than letters and numbers. She was teaching empathy. She was teaching hope. The walls of that school carried more than voices. They carried echoes of discovery, the first attempts at writing, the laughter of recess, the silence of concentration. They carried dreams that would grow quietly, dreams that would one day shape farms, families, communities, nations. Some children would become farmers, others teachers, a few leaders, but all of them carried the same legacy, the transformative power of knowledge. There were hard days, rain, exhaustion, hunger, but no one complained, because they knew that learning was a privilege, and knowledge was something no storm could wash away. The school was small, but inside it lived the vastness of tomorrow. And when the sun set, children walked home with pride in their steps. The teacher erased the board, looked out the window, and smiled. She knew the world was changing slowly, but changing, and that her little wooden room was the first step in a nation learning to dream. Today, we have larger schools, digital books, endless technology, but do we still carry the same gratitude? Do we still look at knowledge as a gift, as something sacred, as something worth walking miles for? The one-room schoolhouse whispers to us across time. Learning is simple, but it changes everything. Teaching is an act of love. Learning is an act of faith. And here is where I invite you, gently, to pause. Think of your own journey with education. Think of the first time a teacher's words opened a door for you. Think of the moment when knowledge felt like freedom. If this memory stirs something inside you, hold it close, because remembering is not nostalgia, it is a way of keeping the flame alive. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who values learning, not as a click, not as a gesture, but as a gift, a reminder that education is not about tools, but about hearts willing to teach and minds willing to believe. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and dew. Across the fields, the faint sound of a bell began to rise. It was not a grand bell, not polished bronze or shining brass. It was a simple piece of iron, suspended by rope, yet its voice was strong enough to awaken valleys and hills. That sound was more than a call to class. It was a call to hope. It was the heartbeat of a community that believed in tomorrow. Children stirred from their homes, some from small wooden cabins, others from farmhouses surrounded by animals and crops. They tied worn shoes, pulled on patched coats, and began the long walk toward the school. The path was not easy. It wound through mud, across streams, sometimes over frozen ground that cracked beneath their steps. But each child carried something invisible, a determination that no hardship could silence. Books were precious, often shared among siblings. Some were torn, their pages yellowed, but they were treasures nonetheless. Children held them close, as if the words inside were keys to a secret world. And in truth, they were, because every letter learned, every number understood, was a step away from ignorance, a step toward freedom. The school itself stood humbly, a wooden building with a roof that leaked in heavy rain, walls scarred by time, and windows that rattled in the wind. Inside, benches were hard, the floor uneven, the air filled with the smell of chalk and smoke from the stove. Yet to those children, it was a palace, because within those walls, they could dream beyond the boundaries of their farms and villages. The bell's echo carried stories. It told of children who had walked miles, of families who sacrificed so their sons and daughters could learn, of communities that believed education was worth every struggle. It was not just a sound, it was a promise that tomorrow could be different. As the children arrived, their faces reflected both fatigue and excitement. Some were flushed from the cold, others dusty from the road, but all of them carried the same spark in their eyes. They greeted one another with shy smiles, shared bits of bread, and entered the room with reverence, because they knew that inside, something sacred awaited. The teacher stood ready, her hands chalk-stained, her heart steady. She watched them file in, each child carrying a story, each child carrying a dream. She knew the weight of her task. She was not only teaching letters and numbers, she was shaping futures. She was planting seeds that would grow into fields of possibility. The lessons began slowly. Older children helped the younger ones, voices overlapping, the room alive with effort. Mistakes were frequent, but laughter softened them. The teacher's voice guided, firm yet kind, a melody of patience and conviction. Every correction was a gift, every encouragement a spark. Outside, the world was harsh. Fields demanded labor, families struggled to survive, storms threatened crops and homes. But inside the school, there was a different rhythm. It was the rhythm of learning, the rhythm of hope. And that rhythm was stronger than hunger, stronger than fatigue, stronger than fear. The bell rang again, marking recess. Children spilled outside, their laughter rising into the sky. They played simple games, ran across the grass, shared stories of home. For a moment, the hardships of life disappeared. They were simply children, free, joyful, united by the gift of learning. And when the bell called them back, they returned willingly, because they knew that inside those walls, their dreams were waiting. The one-room schoolhouse was not just a building, it was a sanctuary. It was a place where the future was being written, letter by letter, word by word, lesson by lesson. The sound of the bell lingered in their hearts. It was a reminder that education was not easy, but it was worth every step, every mile, every sacrifice. It was a reminder that knowledge was not given freely, but earned through perseverance. And it was a reminder that even the smallest school, in the most humble place, could hold the power to change the world. She stood at the front of the room, chalk dust clinging to her fingers, her eyes steady, her presence both fragile and unshakable. The one-room schoolhouse was her stage, and though the walls were plain and the benches hard, she carried within her the power to change lives. The teacher was often a young woman, barely older than some of her students, yet she carried herself with dignity and strength. Her voice was firm, not loud, but filled with conviction. It was the kind of voice that could silence doubt, the kind of voice that could turn fear into courage. Every word she spoke was more than instruction. It was a promise that tomorrow could be brighter. She taught without modern tools. There were no computers, no projectors, no glossy textbooks, only chalk, slate, and her unwavering belief in the value of knowledge. Her lessons were simple, but they were profound. She taught letters as if they were keys, numbers as if they were bridges, stories as if they were lanterns guiding the way. Her students watched her with reverence. They saw in her not only a teacher, but a symbol of possibility. She was proof that learning could lift them beyond the boundaries of their farms, beyond the hardships of their daily lives. She was proof that education was not just about facts, but about freedom. When she wrote on the board, her movements were deliberate, each stroke of chalk a declaration of hope. She explained patiently, repeating when necessary, never showing frustration. Her patience was endless, her dedication unshakable. She believed in every child, even those who struggled, even those who doubted themselves. And when mistakes were made, she did not scold harshly. She corrected with kindness, turning failure into opportunity. Her classroom was not a place of fear, but a place of growth. Children learned not only from her words, but from her example. They learned that perseverance mattered, that kindness mattered, that belief in oneself mattered. She carried stories within her, stories of history, stories of courage, stories of people who had fought for freedom and dignity. She shared them not as lessons, but as gifts. Her students listened wide-eyed, their imaginations ignited, their hearts stirred. Through her stories, they learned empathy. Through her stories, they learned hope. Her presence extended beyond the classroom. She was counselor, comforter, guide. Children came to her with worries, with questions, with dreams. She listened, she encouraged, she reminded them that their voices mattered. In a world that often silenced children, she gave them the courage to speak. The teacher's role was not easy. She faced exhaustion, scarcity of resources, sometimes skepticism from adults who doubted the value of education. But she never wavered, because she knew that every child deserved the chance to learn. She knew that knowledge was the only inheritance that could never be taken away. Her classroom was a sanctuary. It was a place where children could be more than laborers, more than helpers in the fields. It was a place where they could be dreamers, thinkers, builders of futures. And she was the guardian of that sanctuary. At times, she looked out the window, watching the horizon, wondering what her students would become. She imagined them as farmers who understood the land, as teachers who carried forward the flame, as leaders who spoke with wisdom. She imagined them shaping a nation, one lesson at a time. Her voice carried through the room, steady, unwavering. It was not just the sound of instruction, it was the sound of hope. It was the sound of a future being born. And though she had little, though her tools were simple, she gave everything she had. Her gift was not measured in wealth, but in the lives she touched. Her legacy was not written in books, but in the hearts of her students. The one-room schoolhouse was small, but her presence made it vast. She filled it with courage, with empathy, with possibility. She filled it with love. And when the day ended, when the children walked home, her voice lingered in their minds. It reminded them that they were capable, that they were worthy, that they were part of something greater. Her voice was a light, guiding them through the darkness of doubt. The teacher's voice was not just heard, it was felt. It was carried in the hearts of children, echoing long after the lessons were done. It was the voice of hope, and it was the voice of tomorrow. The rhythm of the one-room schoolhouse was unlike any other. It was not divided by age, not separated by grade, not ordered by perfection. It was a living tapestry, woven from voices of different stages of learning. Older children read aloud, their voices trembling with pride. Younger ones stumbled through numbers, counting on fingers, while the smallest scribbled suns and cows on slates, their drawings crude but filled with joy. It was a place where learning was not uniform, but shared, layered, alive. The benches creaked under the weight of bodies, the air filled with whispers, the scratching of pencils, the steady rhythm of chalk against the board. Mistakes were common, but laughter softened them. The teacher's patience was endless, her encouragement steady. She reminded them that every step forward mattered, no matter how small. When the bell rang for recess, the children spilled outside, their laughter rising into the sky. They ran across the grass, played simple games, shared bread and apples, shared dreams of what they might become. In those moments, differences disappeared. The farmer's son played with the blacksmith's daughter. The youngest chased the oldest, and all were united by the joy of childhood. The lesson was clear: no one learns alone. Knowledge was not only about books, but about community, about sharing, about growing together. Winter brought its own challenges. The cold seeped through the wooden walls, the wind rattled the windows, and the children's breath hung in the air like smoke. They huddled close to the stove, their fingers stiff, their cheeks red. The teacher lit the fire, its glow fragile but comforting. Around it, she told stories. Stories of courage, of kings and queens, of slaves who dreamed of freedom, of heroes who fought for justice. Her words painted worlds beyond the classroom, worlds filled with bravery and compassion. The children listened, wide-eyed, their imaginations ignited, their hearts stirred. Through those stories, they learned more than letters and numbers. They learned empathy. They learned hope. They learned that education was not only about facts, but about values. It was about becoming human, about becoming kind, about becoming strong. The stove crackled, the fire flickered, and the room glowed with warmth. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was light. Inside, there was courage. Inside, there was love. The teacher's stories lingered long after the fire died. Children carried them home, retelling them to siblings, to parents, to neighbors, and in doing so, they spread the lessons of empathy and hope. The one-room schoolhouse was not only a place of learning, it was a place of transformation. It was a place where character was shaped, where dreams were nurtured, where futures were born. Second call to action, discreet and here, I invite you to reflect. Think of the stories that shaped you. Think of the lessons you learned, not from books, but from voices, from moments, from people who believed in you. If one of those memories comes to mind, share it, because every story we tell, every memory we pass on, is a way of keeping the flame alive. The daily life of the one-room schoolhouse was simple, but it was profound. It was filled with laughter, with struggle, with warmth, with hope. It was proof that education is not about luxury, but about love. It was proof that learning is not about perfection, but about perseverance. And it was proof that even the smallest room, in the humblest place, can hold the power to change the world. The one-room schoolhouse was never free of hardship. Rain poured through cracks in the roof, wind rattled the windows, and cold seeped through the walls. Children walked miles in heavy storms, their shoes soaked, their clothes clinging to their skin. Yet they came, because the promise of learning was stronger than the weight of discomfort. The road was long, sometimes muddy, sometimes frozen, sometimes endless, but each step carried meaning. Each step was a declaration of faith. Children knew that inside the school, there was warmth, there was hope, there was possibility. The benches were hard, the room crowded, the lessons demanding, but no one complained, because they understood that education was a privilege, a treasure that could not be taken away. They knew that knowledge was freedom, and freedom was worth every sacrifice. The teacher watched them with admiration. She saw their determination, their resilience, their courage. She knew that each child carried a story, a struggle, a dream, and she knew that her role was to honor those stories, to nurture those dreams, to turn struggle into strength. The walls of the school carried memories. They held the echoes of voices, the laughter of recess, the silence of concentration. They held the dreams of children who believed in tomorrow. They held the legacy of a community that valued learning above comfort. Every child who passed through those doors carried something away. Some carried the ability to read, others the courage to speak, others the strength to dream, but all carried the same gift, the belief that knowledge could transform their lives. Years passed, and those children grew. Some became farmers, working the land with wisdom. Some became teachers, passing on the flame of learning. Some became leaders, guiding communities with compassion. But all carried within them the legacy of the one-room schoolhouse. It was a legacy of perseverance. It was a legacy of hope. It was a legacy of faith. Because the school was more than a building. It was a symbol. It was proof that even in the harshest conditions, learning could thrive. It was proof that even in the smallest room, the future could be born. The memory of the school lingered in hearts. It lingered in stories told by parents to children, in lessons passed down through generations, in communities that continued to value education. It lingered as a reminder that knowledge is not about luxury, but about love. It lingered as a reminder that learning is not about ease, but about perseverance. The legacy of the one-room schoolhouse was not written in books. It was written in lives. It was written in the courage of children who walked miles in the rain. It was written in the patience of teachers who taught with nothing but chalk and faith. It was written in the communities that believed in the power of education. And that legacy continues. Because every time a child learns, every time a teacher teaches, every time a community values knowledge, the spirit of the one-room schoolhouse lives on. It lives in classrooms filled with technology, in schools with modern tools, in nations that continue to dream. It lives in the belief that education is the foundation of freedom. It lives in the belief that learning is the path to hope. It lives in the belief that teaching is an act of love. The struggles of the past were not in vain. They were seeds planted in the soil of history, seeds that grew into forests of possibility, seeds that continue to bear fruit today. The one-room schoolhouse was small, but its legacy is vast. It was fragile, but its spirit is unbreakable. It was humble, but its lessons are eternal. And as we remember it, we honor the children who walked miles, the teachers who gave everything, the communities who believed. We honored the legacy of perseverance, the legacy of hope, the legacy of faith. The day in the one-room schoolhouse always ended the same way. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Children gathered their books, their slates, their pencils worn down to stubs. They stepped outside, their faces glowing with pride, their hearts carrying the weight of lessons learned. The long walk home awaited them, but they did not mind, because they carried something invisible, something priceless: hope. The teacher remained behind, erasing the chalkboard slowly, her hands tired, her spirit steady. She looked out the window, watching the horizon, watching the children disappear into the distance, and she smiled, because she knew the world was changing. Not quickly, not easily, but changing nonetheless. And she knew that her little wooden room was the first step in a nation learning to dream. The sunset was more than a closing of the day. It was a symbol. It was a reminder that every ending carries the seed of a beginning. The children carried their lessons home, shared them with siblings, with parents, with neighbors, and in doing so, they spread the flame of knowledge. The one-room schoolhouse was small, but its reach was infinite. Today, we live in a different world. We have larger schools, digital books, endless technology. We have tools that those children could never have imagined. But do we still carry the same gratitude? Do we still look at knowledge as sacred? Do we still believe that learning is worth sacrifice? The one-room schoolhouse whispers across time. It tells us that learning is simple, but it changes everything. It tells us that teaching is an act of love. It tells us that learning is an act of faith. It tells us that the future begins not with technology, but with a lesson well taught, a lesson well learned. The sunset reminds us that the day may end, but the flame continues. The children of the past carried it forward. We must carry it now, because education is not about luxury. It is about love, because knowledge is not about ease. It is about perseverance, because learning is not about perfection. It is about transformation. The one-room schoolhouse was humble, but its lessons are eternal. It was fragile, but its spirit is unbreakable. It was small, but its legacy is vast. And as we remember it, we honor the children who walked miles, the teachers who gave everything, the communities who believed. We honor the legacy of perseverance, the legacy of hope, the legacy of faith. If this story touched your heart, share this video. Leave a comment with the lesson you take from your own journey, because every memory we share, every reflection we offer, is a way to keep the flame alive. Together, we can remind the world that education is not just about knowledge, but also about love, faith, and hope. This was another episode of the channel, Old Memories of America, part of the series How We Lived, the America We Remember, where every memory is a lesson, and every lesson, a legacy of faith and simplicity, keeping the flame of the past alive. Don't forget the next episode is coming soon. Until then,